Welcome back to AU Family Channel, and thank you so much for being here. It truly means the world to have you as one of our loyal listeners. If our stories have ever touched your heart, we are so grateful that you keep coming back to spend this time with us. So find somewhere comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let us begin today's story, together. Her name was Ruth, and I spent the first 2 years I knew her working as hard as I possibly could to hate her, and I failed, completely, and it was the best failure of my entire life. She married my father when I was 12, 3 years after my mother died, and I decided, before I had even really met her, that she was an intruder, a replacement, an enemy, and that loving her would be a betrayal of the mother I had lost. I built a wall around my heart with her name on the outside of it, and Ruth spent 2 patient years quietly, gently, without ever once forcing it, taking that wall down brick by brick, until one day I looked up and realized that the woman I had sworn to hate had become, somehow, the mother I did not know I still needed. I need you to understand how much I loved my mother, because that is the only way any of this makes sense. She died when I was 9, slowly, of an illness that took her a piece at a time, and her death carved a hole in me that I did not think anything could ever fill. For 3 years after, it was just my father and me, 2 wounded people rattling around a house full of her absence, and in my grief I had made her into something almost holy, a perfect memory I would defend against anyone. So when my father, lonely in a way I was too young to understand, met Ruth and slowly fell in love with her, I did not see a man finding happiness again. I saw a betrayal. I saw someone trying to take my mother's place. And I decided, with all the fierce loyalty of a grieving 12-year-old, that I would never, ever let her. Ruth came into our lives gradually, and then permanently, and from the very beginning I made my position clear. I was cold to her. I was rude to her. I answered her questions in single words, refused her small kindnesses, and made sure, in 100 small daily ways, that she understood she was not welcome, not wanted, and would never be accepted. I told myself I was being loyal to my mother. I told myself that hating Ruth was a way of loving the woman I had lost. And Ruth, who could have responded with anger, or coldness of her own, or by pressuring me to accept her, did none of those things. She simply stayed. Patient, warm, undemanding, present. She absorbed my hostility without ever returning it, and she waited, with a patience I did not understand until much later, for the grieving boy behind the wall to be ready. The thing that confused me most, in those early days, was that Ruth never tried to replace my mother, never tried to make me forget her, never once competed with her memory. I had braced myself for a woman who would want to erase the mother I loved, and instead I got a woman who kept my mother's photographs on the walls, who asked me to tell her stories about my mom, who marked the anniversary of her death with a quiet gentleness that I was not ready to accept but could not help but notice. Ruth did not want to take my mother's place. She understood, in a way my 12-year-old grief could not, that my mother's place was permanent and hers was something else entirely, something new, something that did not require the erasing of anyone. But I was not ready to see that yet. I was still committed to hating her. I tested Ruth, constantly, in the way that hurt children test the adults who try to love them. I pushed every boundary, rejected every kindness, said cruel things designed to wound. I told her, more than once, that she was not my mother and never would be. I told her I did not want her there. I made my father choose, over and over, in small painful ways, between his new wife and his grieving son. And through all of it, Ruth did not break, did not retaliate, did not give up. She would absorb the cruelty, and then the next morning she would make my breakfast anyway, ask about my day anyway, show up for me anyway, as though my hostility were a storm she was simply waiting out, certain that the sun was still there behind the clouds. I did not understand that kind of love then. I understand it now, and it takes my breath away. There was a day, early on, that I returned to often, because it was the first crack in my wall, though I did not admit it at the time. I had a terrible day at school, one of those days when grief ambushes you out of nowhere, and I came home and locked myself in my room and cried the way I only let myself cry when no one could see. And Ruth, who must have heard, did not knock, did not intrude, did not try to fix it. She simply left a plate of food outside my door, and a note, and the note said, "I am here if you want me, and I am here if you do not." No pressure. No demand. Just presence. And I ate the food, alone, and I kept the note, and I did not tell her, but something in me shifted, just slightly, the first loosening of a brick I had thought was permanent. I want to tell you about who Ruth was, because it matters, because the woman I was trying so hard to hate was, I slowly came to realize, one of the kindest and steadiest people I have ever known. She had a quiet strength to her, an unshakable calm that made our chaotic grieving house feel, for the first time in years, like it had a floor under it again. She was patient in a way that seemed almost superhuman, endlessly warm without ever being cloying, and she had a way of paying attention, of really seeing a person, that I had not experienced since my mother died. She saw me. Through all my hostility and cruelty, she saw the frightened, grieving boy underneath, and she loved him, steadily, and asked for nothing in return. I was too busy hating her to notice, at first. But you cannot be truly seen for long without beginning to feel it. The illness came in the second year, my illness, a bad one, the kind that lands a child in a hospital bed for a long, frightening stay. And it was during that illness that the wall I had built against Ruth finally, truly began to come down, because of what she did, or rather, because of what she simply, quietly was. My father, who loved me, had to keep working, had to keep our lives from falling apart, and could not be at the hospital every hour. And so it was Ruth who was there. Ruth who sat by my bed through the long frightening nights. Ruth who was the first face I saw when I woke and the last before I slept. The woman I had sworn to hate did not leave my side, and in my fear and my weakness, I was too tired to keep hating her, and I let her stay. There was one night, the worst night, when I was frightened and in pain and calling out, in my half-sleep, not for Ruth, but for my mother, for my dead mother, crying out for the woman who could not come. And Ruth, who might have been hurt by that, who might have felt the sting of being the one who was there while I cried for the one who was gone, did not flinch. She took my hand, and she said, "I know, sweetheart, I know you want your mom, and I am so sorry she cannot be here, but I am here, and I am not going anywhere, and I have got you." And she held my hand through the whole long night, while I cried for another woman, and she did not let go. I have never, in my whole life, felt anything more like love than that. And I was 12, and I finally understood that I had been wrong about her. When I came home from the hospital, weak and changed, something between Ruth and me had changed too. The wall was not gone, not yet, but it had a door in it now, and I had started, tentatively, to let her through. I let her take care of me during my recovery, and I discovered that being taken care of by Ruth was a kind of quiet miracle, gentle and unhurried and unconditional. I began to talk to her, really talk, in a way I had refused to before. And one afternoon, in the middle of some ordinary conversation, I called her Ruth, warmly, without the cold edge I had always put on her name, and I saw her eyes fill, just slightly, and I understood how much my 2 years of hostility had cost her, and how patiently she had borne it, waiting for exactly this small ordinary moment. I asked her, once I was well enough to be curious about someone other than myself, why she had stayed, why she had put up with 2 years of my cruelty without ever giving up on me. And Ruth thought about it, in that careful way she had, and then she said something I have never forgotten. She said, "Because you were not being cruel to me. You were being loyal to your mother, and you were frightened that loving me meant losing her, and I understood that, because grief makes us do strange things. I was never angry at you. I was just waiting for you to learn that you did not have to choose, that there was room in your heart for your mom and for me too, that loving me was not a betrayal of her. I was always going to wait, she said. You were worth waiting for. That was the thing that finally, completely, took the wall down. You do not have to choose. That was what I had gotten wrong, for 2 whole years. I had believed, with all the fierce black and white certainty of a grieving child, that loving Ruth would be a betrayal of my mother, that my heart had room for only one, that accepting a new mother meant abandoning the one I had lost. And Ruth showed me, patiently, over 2 years, that this was not true, that love is not a finite thing to be rationed, that my mother's place in my heart was permanent and untouchable and that there was still room, alongside it, for someone new. I did not have to stop loving my mother to start loving Ruth. I could do both. My heart was bigger than my grief had let me believe. Once I let myself love Ruth, the change in our home was extraordinary. The house that had been a place of grief and tension became, slowly, a home again, a real one, warm and steady in a way it had not been since my mother got sick. My father, who had spent 2 years torn between the son he loved and the wife he loved, watching us wage our quiet war, began to relax, to laugh again, to become the man he had been before grief had hollowed him out. And I understood, watching him, that my hostility to Ruth had been hurting him too, that in trying to punish her I had been punishing him, denying him the happiness he had found and so badly deserved. Letting myself love Ruth did not just heal me. It healed all 3 of us. It made us, for the first time, a family. I learned so much from Ruth in the years that followed, but the first and deepest lesson was about patience, about the kind of love that does not demand and does not force but simply stays, present and warm and undeterred, waiting for the wounded person to be ready. Ruth could have forced the issue. She could have demanded my respect, pressured me to accept her, made my father choose. Instead she chose the harder, slower, truer path. She simply loved me, steadily, through 2 years of my rejecting it, and she trusted that love, given patiently and without condition, would eventually do its quiet work. And it did. She taught me that the deepest love is not loud or demanding. It is patient. It stays. It waits. It is there when you are cruel and there when you are kind, until one day you realize you cannot remember how you ever lived without it. There is a memory I hold from a few years into our new life, a small ordinary one that means everything to me. It was a school event, the kind parents come to, and I was performing in something, nervous, scanning the crowd. And there in the audience was my father, and beside him was Ruth, and when I found her face in the crowd, she was beaming at me, so proud, so present, so completely there for me, and I realized in that moment that I no longer thought of her as my stepmother, as the intruder, as the woman I had sworn to hate. I thought of her as my mom. Not a replacement for the mother I had lost, but a second mother, added, a new love that did not erase the old one but stood beside it. And I found her face in the crowd, the way you look for your mother, and there she was. I started calling Ruth Mom, eventually, and I want to tell you about the first time, because it was one of the most important moments of my life, and one of hers. It came out naturally, in the middle of some ordinary sentence, Mom, can you, and I heard myself say it, and I stopped, and Ruth stopped, and we looked at each other. And I saw, on her face, an emotion so deep and so overwhelmed that it made my own throat tighten. 3 years of patient love, of absorbed cruelty, of steady undemanding presence, and it had led to this, to a grieving boy calling her mom, freely, warmly, from the heart. She did not make a big deal of it. She just said, yes, sweetheart, and her voice cracked, just slightly. But I knew what it meant to her. It meant everything. It meant she had waited, and I had come home. I asked Ruth, years later, whether it had ever hurt her, in those first 2 years, being called by her name with such coldness, being told she was not my mother and never would be, having her kindness rejected day after day. And she was honest with me, in the way she always was. She said, "Of course it hurt. I would be lying if I said it did not. There were nights I cried, nights I wondered if you would ever let me in, nights your father held me while I doubted myself. But," she said, "I never once blamed you for it, because I understood where it came from. It came from love, from grief, from loyalty to your mother. And a boy who could love his mother that fiercely," she said, "was a boy worth waiting for, because I knew that when you finally let yourself love me, you would love me like that too." And she was right. I did. Ruth taught me something profound about the difference between replacing and adding, and it is a lesson I have carried into every part of my life. I had believed, in my grief, that love works by replacement, that a new love must push out an old one, that there is only so much room. And Ruth taught me, by her patient example, that love does not work that way at all. She never tried to replace my mother, never competed with her memory, never asked me to love her less so I could love Ruth more. She simply added herself, a new love standing alongside the old, and in doing so she showed me that the human heart is not a fixed container but an expanding one, that every new love we let in does not diminish the loves we already carry but somehow makes room, makes us larger, gives us more capacity to love, not less. There was a hard season, a few years in, when I was a teenager and difficult in all the ordinary ways teenagers are difficult, and I said something cruel to Ruth in a moment of adolescent anger, something that reached back to the old wound, something like, "You are not my real mother." And I saw it land, saw the old hurt flash across her face. And then I saw something else, something that taught me about the security of real love. She did not crumble, did not retaliate, did not let my cruelty shake what we had built. She just looked at me and said, calmly, "I know I am not your first mother. But I am your mother, and I have earned that, and you know it, and you are angry about something else and taking it out on me, and that is all right, but do not pretend I am not your mother, because we both know that I am." And she was right, and I apologized, and I never doubted her place again. I learned from Ruth that being a parent is not about biology, or about being first, or about replacing anyone. It is about showing up. It is about the daily, unglamorous, patient work of being there, of making the breakfasts and sitting by the hospital beds and finding the child's face in the crowd and loving them through their cruelty and their grief and their difficulty, steadily, without condition, for years. My mother gave me life and 9 precious years of love, and I will treasure her forever. And Ruth, who came later, who was not first, who I swore to hate, earned the name Mother through years of patient, faithful, unconditional showing up. Both of them are my mothers. One by blood and one by choice, and the one by choice had to work harder and wait longer and love more patiently for the title, and she earned every letter of it. As I grew up and moved through the world, I came to appreciate more and more what Ruth had done, the sheer generosity and patience of it. She had walked into a house full of grief, married a widowed man, and taken on a hostile, wounded child who wanted nothing to do with her, and she had chosen, day after day, to love us anyway, to stay anyway, to give without receiving, for as long as it took. She had signed up for the hardest kind of love, the kind that is rejected and must persist anyway, and she had done it not for gratitude or reward but simply because she saw a hurting boy and a grieving man and decided to love them home. There is a kind of heroism in that quiet patient faithfulness that the world rarely celebrates, and I have spent my adult life trying to celebrate it, trying to be worthy of it, trying to love others the patient way Ruth loved me. There is a moment I treasure from my wedding day, years later, that says everything about what Ruth became to me. When the time came to honor the important people in my life, I honored both my mothers. I spoke of the mother who gave me life, who I lost too young, whose love shaped my earliest years and whose memory I carry always. And then I turned to Ruth, and I honored the mother who chose me, who waited 2 years for a hostile grieving boy to let her in, who sat by my hospital bed and held my hand while I cried for another woman and did not let go, who earned the name Mother through years of patient faithful love. And I watched Ruth weep, in the front row, in the seat where a mother sits, and I understood that we had both come so far, from the boy who swore to hate her to the man honoring her as his mother on the most important day of his life. I think often about how close I came to missing Ruth entirely, to spending my whole childhood behind that wall, rejecting the love that was patiently waiting on the other side. If Ruth had been a different kind of person, if she had responded to my cruelty with cruelty, or given up, or pressured me, or competed with my mother's memory, I would have hated her forever, and I would have missed one of the great loves of my life. It was her patience that saved us, her refusal to force it, her willingness to simply love me and wait. She let me come to her in my own time, at my own pace, and because she did, I came all the way, not grudgingly but completely, with my whole heart. The love I might have missed became one of the deepest loves I have ever known, because one woman was patient enough to wait for a wounded boy to be ready. Ruth taught me that grief and new love are not enemies, that we do not honor the people we have lost by refusing to love again. For 2 years I had believed that hating Ruth was a way of loving my mother, that my loyalty to the dead required rejecting the living. And it was Ruth who showed me the truth, that my mother would not have wanted my grief to close my heart, that the best way to honor a love you have lost is to let it make you more capable of love, not less. My mother loved me. She would have wanted me to be loved, to have a mother's care through my childhood, to have the warm steady home that Ruth built for us. Loving Ruth did not betray my mother. It fulfilled what my mother would have wanted most, that her son be loved and cared for and safe. I see that now. I wish I had seen it sooner. I want to say something about my father in all this, because Ruth's love healed him too, and watching that taught me something about second chances. My father had been destroyed by my mother's death, hollowed out, going through the motions of a life that had lost its center. And Ruth brought him back, patiently, the same way she brought me back, with steady undemanding love. She did not replace my mother in his heart any more than she replaced her in mine. She simply loved him, and let him love her, and gave him permission to be happy again without guilt. And watching my father learn to laugh again, to hope again, to build a life again with a good woman who loved him, taught me that grief does not have to be the end of the story, that even the deepest loss can be followed by new love, and that letting yourself be happy again is not a betrayal of what you lost. It is a way of honoring the capacity for love that the lost person helped build in you. People sometimes ask me, when I tell this story, whether it was hard to love a stepmother, and I always tell them that the hard part was not loving Ruth. Loving Ruth was the easiest thing in the world once I let myself do it. The hard part was the wall I had built, the belief that loving her would betray my mother, the 2 years I wasted in hostility and grief before I let her in. The loving itself was not hard. Ruth made it easy, by being so patient and so warm and so undemanding. The only difficulty was my own resistance, my own fear, my own mistaken belief that my heart had room for only one mother. Once that belief fell, the love rushed in effortlessly. And I have wondered, ever since, how much love we all miss out on because of walls like the one I built, walls made of fear and false loyalty and the belief that there is not enough room. Ruth is still my mother, all these years later, still steady, still warm, still the person who taught me the most about patient, unconditional love. She has been there for every important moment of my adult life, the way a mother is, celebrating my joys and steadying me through my sorrows, loving me with the same faithful constancy she showed the hostile 12-year-old who swore to hate her. And I have spent my adult years trying to give back to her a fraction of what she gave to me, trying to be the son she waited so patiently for, trying to honor the extraordinary gift of her patient love. She did not have to love me. I gave her every reason not to. And she loved me anyway, until I loved her back. That is the kind of love I want to give the world. That is the kind of love Ruth taught me exists. I learned from Ruth that the people who love us most are sometimes the ones we resist the hardest, and that resistance is often a measure of how frightened we are, how much we have to lose, how deep the wound is that makes us afraid to love again. I resisted Ruth so fiercely precisely because I had been so wounded by my mother's death, because I was so afraid of loving and losing again, because letting Ruth in meant risking my heart in a way that terrified me. And Ruth understood that my hostility was really fear, that my cruelty was really grief, and she was patient with the fear and the grief instead of taking offense at the hostility and the cruelty. She saw past my behavior to my wound, and she healed the wound instead of punishing the behavior. That is a wisdom I am still trying to learn, the wisdom to see the fear behind someone's coldness, and to answer it with patience instead of coldness of my own. There is a lesson in Ruth's story about the difference between the love we are owed and the love we are given freely, and it has shaped how I think about family. Ruth owed me nothing. I was not her child. I was a hostile stranger's grieving son who rejected her at every turn. By every measure of obligation, she could have kept her distance, protected herself, loved my father and left me to my hostility. Instead she gave me a love I had not earned and did not deserve, a free gift, offered patiently and without condition, for years, until I finally accepted it. And I have come to believe that this freely given love, the love we are not owed, the love that persists in the face of rejection, is the truest and most powerful kind there is. It is the love that heals. It is the love that changes people. It is the love Ruth gave me, and it made me who I am. I think about the note she left outside my door, that first hard day, the note that said I am here if you want me and I am here if you do not. And I understand now that this was the whole philosophy of her love, contained in a single sentence. She did not make her love conditional on my accepting it. She did not withdraw it when I rejected it. She simply made it available, constant and unconditional, there whether I wanted it or not, and she trusted that eventually I would want it. That kind of love, love with no conditions and no expiration, love that stays available through every rejection, is the rarest and most precious thing a person can offer another. Ruth offered it to me for 2 years before I took it. And when I finally did, it healed everything the wall had been protecting, everything the grief had broken. She was there whether I wanted her or not. And thank God she was. I have tried, as an adult, to love the way Ruth loved me, and I have learned how hard it is, how much easier it is to write about patient unconditional love than to actually give it to a person who is rejecting you day after day. When someone is cold to me, my instinct is to be cold back. When someone rejects my kindness, my instinct is to withdraw it. Ruth's instinct was the opposite. She met coldness with warmth, rejection with patience, cruelty with steady presence, and she did it not for a moment but for years. I do not know if I could have done what she did. I am not sure I have that much patience, that much faith, that much capacity to love without receiving. But she is my model, my North Star, the person I measure my own love against. And every time I manage to answer someone's coldness with warmth, I am carrying Ruth forward, keeping her patient love alive in the world. If there is one thing I want you to take from Ruth's story, it is that love is not a finite resource to be rationed, and that letting in a new love does not require betraying an old one. So many of us build walls like the one I built, walls made of loyalty and fear and the false belief that our hearts have room for only so much. We refuse new friendships because we are loyal to old ones. We refuse new love because we are grieving a lost one. We keep people out because letting them in feels like a betrayal of someone else. And Ruth taught me that this is a lie, that the heart is not a fixed container but an expanding one, that every love we let in makes us more capable of love, not less. Do not build the wall I built. Do not make someone wait 2 years to love you. Let the good people in. There is more room than you think. Ruth and I talk often now, and not long ago I thanked her, really thanked her, for the 2 years she waited, for the cruelty she absorbed, for the patient faithful love she gave a boy who gave her every reason to give up. And she waved it off, the way she always does, and she said, "You were worth it, you were always worth it, and I would do it all again." And then she said something that has stayed with me. She said, "Being your mother is the great honor of my life, and I earned it, and no one can ever take it from me, and I would not trade it for anything." And I understood, hearing her, that the love I had resisted so hard had become as precious to her as it had to me, that in loving a hostile grieving boy home, she had gained a son, and that we had given each other something that neither of us could have found any other way. I lost one mother, and I gained another, and I spent 2 years fighting the gift because I did not understand that a gift is not a betrayal, that a new love is not a replacement, that my heart was big enough for both. Ruth waited for me to understand, patiently, without ever forcing it, and when I finally did, she was there, exactly as she had always promised, ready to be the mother I had sworn she could never be. She is my mother now, fully and without qualification, earned through years of patient faithful love, and she stands in my heart beside the mother I lost, both of them cherished, neither diminishing the other. And I am grateful, every single day, that Ruth was patient enough to wait for a wounded boy to take down his wall, and to discover, on the other side, a love he had sworn to hate and could not help but come to treasure. So this week, I want to ask you to look at the walls you have built, and to ask yourself what love you might be keeping out. Maybe it is a step-parent you have refused to accept. Maybe it is a new friend you have kept at a distance out of loyalty to an old one. Maybe it is a person patiently offering you a love you have decided you do not deserve or cannot risk. Whatever your wall is made of, loyalty or fear or grief or pride, I want you to consider taking it down, brick by brick, the way Ruth took mine down, and to discover what has been patiently waiting on the other side. Do not waste 2 years, or 20, keeping out a love that could heal you. The heart has more room than your fear will admit. Let the good ones in. You may find, as I did, that the love you swore to reject becomes the love that saves you. Thank you so much for staying with me all the way to the end of this story. It truly means the world that you are here. If Ruth and her patient, faithful, unconditional love moved your heart the way she moved mine, please give this video a like and subscribe to AU Family Channel, where a brand new story is waiting for you every single week. And remember what a patient stepmother taught a grieving boy who swore to hate her. Love is not a finite thing, and letting in a new love is never a betrayal of an old one, and the heart always has more room than our fear will admit. So this week, look at your walls, and let the good people in. They may be the ones who save you. I will see you in the next one.